Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Allie with A. Marie Speaks, and this is going to be a quick video, just a bit of a personal type of video. I don't typically, well, I keep saying this, I don't typically do these videos, but lately I've been doing these videos, so I guess this is going to be more of a personal talk, but also I think very relevant to everyone, and so that's why I kind of decided to turn the camera on and do it this way. Although it is kind of difficult for me to formulate in a concise way exactly what I mean, without, being too personal, which I don't want to be. So welcome, thank you for watching this kind of consciousness stream type of conversation. I'm going to bring up this topic. I've talked a bit about homeschool, about parenting, about light and shadow work, about mind control mechanisms, and habitual unhappiness. Quite a bit on both my newer channel and my older channel over the last couple of years. And I just thought that this kind of culminates a lot of these things. So I was hoping, oh, my camera's starting to dim. Oh no. Let's see. If it turns pink, I'm sorry. And if it's been already turned pink, I can't tell sometimes. I just see this sort of closing out on the camera, and then sometimes I notice it had like a pink thing going on, or sometimes it gets super dark, so forgive me for that. Distractions. But I started yesterday this podcast, and then I didn't get through it. I made some notes around it, and I thought this morning I was going to pick it back up, but then I realized I didn't even save it yesterday. So I think I could do recovery in Audacity somehow, but I'm not quite sure, so I'm just going to pick it up with this video and start over. Fitting this in early in the morning before I have to work and homeschool and things, so having my coffee. But the thing that I wanted to bring up here, and it doesn't have to just be about parenting, and it has to do with our own shadow, our own personal development, and children. And just because I've noticed this and bringing this up because of homeschooling, it also very much applies to plenty of things at my job, at my work, and with adults that I interact with all the time. And so I'm going to use a bit of frameworking and speak a little bit about this from the angle of our children and raising the next generation, but it's very much applicable to our own shadow and how we nurture, mother, father, our inner child. And really, some people dig that, some people don't. I find that there is really tangible work inside the self when we allow, sorry for the loud cars, when we allow the inner child to really be a prominent figure for ourselves, and to own its childlike self reactions, intuitions, and on all the things that come in between there. But to also not let the toddler drive the car, right? To remember, just like when my kids were younger, and they were crying in the car or something, you still have to get to where you're going. You can't just turn around and say, okay, you drive, you want to go here, you get in the front, and I relinquish everything, and now you're happy. You can't just let them take the wheel like that. There comes a point where, as the mother, as the father, the parental figure, that the adult of maturity, that you have to just breathe through it, that you have to let their screaming not bother you, and show them through teaching and through action that it doesn't faze you. And that can be very difficult, especially when it's scratching at you inside. And so working with these types of things with a tangible example like children is really helpful to me. And like I said, even if you don't have children, your children are full grown, or your children aren't my age, or whatever, it doesn't. The examples I'm going to use are not just for them, but they've been brought up within me because of this, and so hence I'm bringing it forth this way. But the main thing that I turn the camera on and that I'd like to talk about is a bit about the operations and how, say in this homeschool example, we have the old monolith of public school or of schooling in general. And that can be, if you're not familiar, and your mindset, mind control isn't the public school model, it could be the private school model. It could be Catholic school model. It could be, that tutor-esque kind of model. Whatever trophy version, Hollywood version of schooling you have in your mind's eye, it sort of becomes like an idol of what we think everything has to match to. It's that cookie cutter outline that you think that your life has to fit into, or else you're not meeting expectations, or else you're not good enough, or else it's not working, or you haven't done enough, or you haven't done a good job. And how we compare, assess, analyze ourselves against those kind of images is difficult in what I'm hoping to kind of speak about today, because it's, of course it's ever changing as well. So it's like, you have a tool belt with tools like a screwdriver and a hammer and a saw, but you can build anything out of those things that you want to, So just because you have a hammer, a saw, and a screwdriver doesn't mean you have to build a cabin. You can make anything out of wood. You could build something out of another material even. It doesn't even have to be wood, right? And we kind of forget that learning, life, that our experiences here, that the things we choose to do, make, and be a part of are as expansive and infinite as that idea. And for school, for me, the thing I want to bring up here is the difficulty in detaching from this, because it's such a strange thing too, because I know that the public school model is incorrect. I didn't want to send my children there. Even my older son, who went through public school for up till 2020, because I just could not see another way in my lifestyle, in my life, in that cookie cutter thing that I thought I had to be. If I was homeschooled, I had to meet these parameters before, and I didn't see myself meeting them, and so I never thought it was an option that could be actually grabbed and taken a hold of for me. I just thought, okay, only reins in my hands are public school, so I better maintain, fix, and counteract all of the public school things for my children. And just that's the best thing that I can do. Which was my stance up till 2020. But once 2020 hit and they sent all the kids home, it became quite obvious I could easily do just what those teachers were doing in public school. And also, for me, it was a wonderful disruption. It felt like beforehand it was a set table playing chess at with public school, with the state, sort of with my children, and with freedom. And that every move I was trying to really calculate out and trying to get that checkmate and really paying attention to it and playing against the school. But with 2020, what happened is like the whole table got flipped. Thank you God. The whole table came in, and God came in and flipped that whole table. And in the commotion, and in the teachers don't know what to do, the whole school doesn't know what to do, everybody's picking up chess pieces, everybody's just trying to, get everybody's seat settled again. I just never went back and never went back, and it wasn't noticed. And what happened is that at the end of the school year, so 2019, 2020 school year is when they sent kids home, right? My younger son was in kindergarten. My older son was in 7th grade. And they finished those school years out remote because the schools just never went back to school that year. You know, when they started at the end of the school year by summertime, they started being like, oh, some kids could come back if you'd like to. If not, you can finish out. You know, they had it was very disorganized. It was just like totally up in the air. And, you know, my kids don't have any of those kind of IEPs or any of those specialized services through school or through the state. And so they're not monitored. They're not like, oh, you have to get back to school. I didn't have any kind of workers who are like, oh, get them back on schedule, get them to this, get them to that, you know. So we just stayed home. I just said, no, I'm keeping them home for the rest of the school year. See you in the fall. And then over the summer we moved and we left the state, and that kind of was not even our choice. We were pushed out of the place that we were staying at, but we didn't want to be in that state anymore because it was unbelievably tyrannical. You know, you couldn't walk down the street if you didn't have a mask on without literally being pointed at, yelled at by some crazy blue liberal or progressive scared weirdo who thought that you breathing in the vicinity outside them was somehow a threat to them, you know. And we started coming up north to, you know, to the next state, to New Hampshire, where we live now, going on hiking trails, going out, noticing none of the stores were didn't have like a security guard out front with a big mask on, like push you out of the way so you couldn't go in the store if you didn't wear a mask. You know, people didn't have masks on. Some stores even said, you're not able to come in here with a mask on. And so that was our first thing, was like, we love New Hampshire, live free or die. And we just started coming up here all the time. But then, of course, you know, our landlord needed our apartment for somebody who had lost their place, and so we had gotten the kind of, next month is the last month that we'll rent to you, so we had to find somewhere to go. Anyways, we ended up here in New Hampshire. We knew we weren't going to stay in Massachusetts. And so luckily, you know, by the time fall came for the 2020-21 school year, we were already up here and settled. And so I said, I'm homeschooling. I had looked up all the laws. New Hampshire was much more conducive to homeschooling for all. They don't have this crazy authoritative like hierarchy of checkpoints and all these things you have to have like Massachusetts does. And so I was like, wow, this is awesome. And everyone, like I looked online, they had huge support groups in New Hampshire, all types of like these big coalition groups that even before 2020 were together, promoting homeschooling and giving parents all of the tools that they need legally in order to say no to the state and how to uphold that right here. And I just thought, wow, this is awesome. This is what I want to be a part of, you know? And so, yeah. I've been homeschooling since then. But I noticed that I had this cookie cutter model of what a good student is, of what a smart kid is, of what public school is, even. Like, not the bad parts of public school, though. You know, not like, you know, that you have to sit down. And I always knew those kind of things I didn't like about public school. But I've still, over the years, found myself with these weird public school standards that somehow I'm like trying to put on my kids. Well, now just one son because my other son graduated last year. So now I just have one son. But yeah, like the content, the quality, the rigorousness of it, like I still found myself really wrapped up in that and promoting that inside my own house. So sort of like finding burrs on me after being outside, you know, I've kind of been like trying to take these things off and get rid of them. And some of them I find again there, and I'm like, why are you back? Why? We don't need to do it this way. We don't have to have this said thing, you know. This is supposed to be curriculum centered around my children, around my son, around the way he learns, around what he wants to learn about. What's wrong with teaching that? You know, but then this strange liberal arts kind of like coagulation of what the state says is a well-rounded person, you know, creeps in. And it's like, oh, you're not doing enough here. Oh, you're not doing there. He's behind in this. He's too ahead in that. You need to even it out, round it. And it's like, why do I keep getting stuck in this mode? Do I keep, you know? But this is where I started off with saying in the beginning, it's not just about homeschool. It's not just about parenting even. This is the shadow. This is the ego. This is whatever we want to look at that as. Satan whispering on your shoulder or whatever. You know, those detrimental comments are part of life. I believe they're part of being human. That's what we've come in here to stand against, to learn discernment towards, and the power of choice, the power of free energy, about our energy, you know, and cultivating and sharing it. And so I think that it is really a malleable practice that is applicable to all different kinds of bad habits, of habitual things, of these kind of like egoic liar loops, these snares and traps that we each have uniquely for ourselves. Like, I couldn't probably pinpoint one for another, but I'm sure you can think of some of them on your own here that you get wrapped up in, or that you're trying to break out of, or you can remember times when you were and you did break out of things like that, right? So I do think that it's really a shadow work thing, but that, you know, homeschooling and my sons are such gears turning everything, you know. And the other thing I kind of wanted to bring up, which is a good example and a good metaphor to use with schooling, but then again we can backtrack and look at how it works for everything else, is that this idea of filling the gap. Right? So we have this old monolithic model, and we all know what doesn't work about it. We all know the things we hate about it. And sometimes it can even just be a hyper-vigilant focus of all like the negative bad things about it. Or conversely, all the good things that we just focus on that make us kind of look over the cons, and we just focus on the pros, and then we stick with this kind of thing we know is not good, or we know is not right, or the best choice, but because we think that the pros outweigh the cons, or we think that, well, the uncomfortable known is better than uncomfortable unknown. And this is like crazy that we get cemented into thinking in this way, you know. And I'm noticing it more and more through schooling, you know, the gap. And it's like, I know that way doesn't work. I know there's better ways to do things. And yet I find myself sort of standing in this, where the arrows are. It's like, don't go back to here, get here. But how? You know? And it's so strange because almost subconsciously or habitually, I find myself bridging the gap with pointing back to the old ways and trying to like drag my kid back into, or force my own examination and observations of assessment back at those things that don't work, or back at those best things out of that model that I used to cling to. And it's like, why am I doing that? You know? And yet I do. And so, like I said, sort of at the start, it's very much like, if, you know, any sort of bad habit, any sort of thing we want to get away from, being able to bridge that gap and find the ways that lead us to newer ideas, newer solutions, newer circumstances, that where we feel safe and secure and comfortable enough to try things on, you know, and not say, oh, it doesn't fit. Oh no, that's definitely not for us. Or oh, this feels really great, but it looks nothing like what's happening over there, so it cannot be right. You know, and to me, a person like myself, you know, that can really be what I do sometimes, you know, is something that's working great for me, although it will look totally different for over there. And then all of a sudden I'll feel like I have to give up that which works good for me, because it's not homogenous with the mainstream. And then I'm back in my own head, like, why are we even having this conversation? You know you don't want to be a part of a mainstream. You literally hate the mainstream. Why are we doing this comparison dance? And then you're finding yourself pulling the short stick out of it at the worst parts of it. You know, you're not even comparing it and saying, yes, I love this. This is me. I'm finally me. No, you're somehow still turning it into some kind of incompatibility. You know, it's strange. You know, I'm hoping by speaking more about it and you know, sharing my feelings on it and working through it in different ways that, you know, I'll wake up to it more. But I thought it's helpful to share exercises and experiments like this, and to be open and honest in these kind of weird positions that we find ourselves in, because it helps others to know they're not alone. It helps myself to know. And it's also a bit of an anchor point when later in the day or another day I will find myself in that weird gap position. And then I'll be able to more comfortably remember this conversation, remember conversations inside my head and other conversations with my husband or even with my children about this, you know, this weird autopilot mode, you know, and also the weirdness of having like propaganda everywhere that is just pushing on you, making you feel like you have to be something that they are, you know. Oh yeah, the last thing I kind of wanted to bring in, and it's a slight solution of what I'm getting towards and how I've been working sort of towards a solution, seeing sort of different solutions popping up, is it's the funniest thing, and it's really great to use children as an example for this, because it speaks wonderfully about generations, you know. I myself, in my generation, I lived through public school. I lived through the certain model. I gained these kind of experiences, bad choices, and lessons through them, right? Now, for my sons, they don't need to make the same bad choices and learn the lesson the same way that I did. They learn the lesson without the bad choice, because they see and witness through the bad choice and the lesson. So they aren't the main figure of learning the lesson. They're a bystander of the lesson. But they still get to integrate their own version of that, at witnessing it, you know? And it's different than the first person view. It's totally different than going through the motions yourself and learning that lesson, the hard lesson yourself. But it's not incompatible with moving forward. And in fact, it works like a shield almost for them. And they now have seen the bad choice, have seen the outcomes. They get this sort of roundabout, better working. And they see the whole solution. They see the bigger picture. They see the whole forest beginning and end without having to go through the path in the middle, you know? And they have a whole different view and insights available to them because of that different journey and different observations. And they really know the place in the future. They know the solutions. They know what works. They don't have that tie back inside here, and inside the spirit that's like yanking you to the mirror to force you to go look at those old things that you want to break away from. They don't have that happening to them. And so they can really freely move into that new future space, the new learning, the new processes, and see those with fresh eyes, and do better problem solving, do better, find better functionality with less baggage than we can. Just because they haven't harbored it the way we have. And I myself, sometimes as the parent, almost, there's a conflict, there's a jealousy, there's a wrongness, there's this, oh, well, let me go burn your hand on the stove too, because do you really know it's hot and won't touch it ever? I have to know that for sure. And you didn't touch it, so now I don't know for sure, so go touch it. It's like there's this weird thing that happens inside the brain. But yet there's this whole other part of the parents like, no, I never would harm my child. No, I would never do that. They get it. They saw I was red hot. They saw me burn my hand and have a blister on my hand for 5 weeks. They know. They saw the whole thing about it. You know? And so the finality is that we should really be listening to them more about what the solutions and the work-throughs are, and about what they see as as problems, as solutions, and as the real work at hand and ahead. Because we get so frameworked in like the present, breaking out of the past and relinquishing things that harbor on from the past, that we can't, we just cannot be fully into the future, the way the next generation is, because they were birthed into it. They have a different capacity, just like we had a different capacity from our parents, and I know from many different things, this same explanation of seeing things differently and not going through the same spirals as my own parents, and the things I learned from them and did differently because of them, and so hoping school will pick up with this as well. But as the leader, as the school teacher, as the one supposed to be in this authoritative hierarchy, I'm supposed to know the lesson every day. I'm supposed to plan it. I'm supposed to grade it. And how does that work in a different setting of school like that? To me, it's like, it's missing pieces. It's different. I'm trying to find the ways that it works, but it's like every day there's these different incompatibilities. There's these different catalytic things like that. Do I jam puzzle pieces together because I just want the answers? I don't want to do that. I don't want to uncomfortably force my kid and myself into this cookie cutter picture of homeschool that doesn't work for us just because, I really want to enable my children to be impassioned learners, to want to do what's best for them, to have a service, a dream, or a goal inside of them which they can run towards with a full tool belt and capability to do good work with whatever they want to do, so yeah, learning and trusting to let them guide the way a little bit more seems to me to be the solution, and what I'm working towards and trying, but as I say I'm trying, you should know I'm failing, right? If you've ever seen that kind of those old lectures about positivity, self-help words, negative words, and all that kind of stuff, they get into a lot of those kind of words that you shouldn't, when you say them, you really mean something else, But I really am working to put my best foot forward, to try out different modalities and experiences, and not let those parameters and those false constructs from before, be imprinting themselves on me. And yeah, so anyway, that's all the time I have for today. It's been half an hour. Thank you so much for listening to me here this morning. Kind of go around about nothing. If you did find it helpful or interesting, if you heard something completely different even that I brought up through it, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear your experiences if you're also a parent, if you're a homeschool parent. If you're not, love to hear anywhere and everywhere of any kind of things people would like to share. Feel free to send me an email or put in the comments. You can find me on Telegram if you'd like to send me a message over there, if you use that app. Otherwise, yeah, that's going to be it for me for today. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.